When you work with pivot tables, you'll often find that you want to recreate a particular configuration. You could write down the fields and the order in which they appear, but it's far easier to record a macro that configures the pivot table for you. So I have a pivot table that contains sales data for firm A and firm B, and it's monthly for the years 2009 and 2010. And I also have the quarter field up here in the report filters area, and my goal is to recreate this configuration by using a macro. So the first thing we need to do is start recording the macro. To do that, we click the View tab on the ribbon, click the Macros button's down arrow, and then click Record Macro. And I'll type in a macro name, and I'll just call it First Position. And now I'll click OK, and Excel will start recording my actions. The first step to recording a pivot table macro in Excel is to clear the entire pivot table and recreate it from scratch. So in this case, with a cell in the pivot table selected, I'll click the Options tab, click Clear, and then click Clear All. Now I can recreate the pivot table from the start. So I will add the year field to the row labels area, month below that, company in the column labels area, quarter in the report filter area, and then revenue in the values area. And I have the same configuration that I had when I started. Now to stop recording, click the View tab on the ribbon, click the Macros button's down arrow, and click Stop Recording. So now we have a macro that will recreate this pivot table position. If you want to view the macro, you can do so by opening it in the Visual Basic Editor. So to do that, from the View tab of the ribbon, click the Macros button's down arrow, click View Macros, and then in the macro dialog box, make sure that the macro you want to see is displayed and highlighted, and then click Edit. When you do, the macro opens inside of the Visual Basic Editor. So I'll double-click to maximize this window within the Visual Basic Editor. So as you can see, there is a lot going on when you create a pivot table. This first line, range B6 select, isn't actually necessary. It's just that I clicked another cell inside the pivot table to ensure it was active. It won't hurt the running at all. And then secondly, you can see all of the actions that I took with regard to the pivot table. So first I cleared the table, and then I added the field year to the row field area in position 1, the field month to the row field area in position 2. Then I added company to the column field in position 1, and then quarter in the page field area in position 1, and then the revenue field in the revenue area. And it uses the sum summary operation. So there's a lot going on with pivot tables, and anytime that you want to work with pivot tables and use macros, you should never try to create these things by hand. There's just too much going on, and it'll take you too long, and it's way too likely that you'll make a mistake. Always record your macro. What I can do, now that I've recorded the macro, is go back into Excel, and to do that, just go up to the File menu and click Close and Return to Microsoft Excel. And then, because there is a macro inside of this file, we need to save it as a macro-enabled file. To do that, click File, and then Save As. And then we can keep the same Record Macro name, but we need to change the type. So click the Save as Type button, and then from the list that appears, click Excel Macro Enabled Workbook, and then click Save. Now your macro will be ready whenever you want it. The macro recording skills I've taught you in this movie apply to any Excel operation, not just pivot tables. But because pivot table macros are extremely complicated, it's easiest to record and use them instead of writing them from scratch.